The pension crisis is so overlooked, and that's such a big mistake. Financial advisors can't help you. Those in charge of our systems can't help you. We are on our own. Assume that the money that you have been paying year after year has been evaporated and there will be nothing left for you. This is the reality that many should face today and not be surprised later down the road. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to talk about topics including the pension crisis. I want to talk about the ECB, quantitative easing, looking at gold, and so much more. Let's begin. So first, we're going to look at this article here out of CNBC talking about pensions. And they will grow to $400 trillion according to the World Economic Forum by the year 2050. Many people would say, hey, that's far down the road. But when you think about it, 30 years ago wasn't that long. And we're talking about 400 trillion. This is a massive number by today's standards or even by 2050 standards. Future generations are on course to become enveloped in the biggest pension crisis in history, according to the World Economic Forum, unless policymakers from the world's leading economies take urgent action. What are they talking about, urgent action? They always talk about entitlement reforms and simply the word reform. That ultimately means cutbacks. They need to cut back. At the same time, they will definitely be increasing taxation. You may not see a necessarily increase on your income tax, but they'll put it somewhere here or there or in multiple places. The Geneva-based organization predicted the challenges of an aging population could result in the world's biggest economies being forced to tackle this pension crisis. All right, the WEF showed 6 countries with the biggest pensions, including US, Canada, UK, Netherlands, Japan, and Australia, as well as the 2 most densely populated countries, China and India, could face a retirement savings gap in excess of $400 trillion in 2050, up from $70 trillion in 2015. Massive increase, and that's all due to the aging population. Now, at the same time, all of these pensions are relying on stock markets and bond markets and housing markets continuing to increase at a rapid clip that doesn't happen historically. I don't know what they're planning on doing here, but ultimately we're in for one hell of a bumpy ride. You don't hear about this type of information being discussed by the financial advisors, and of course the people in charge are going to talk about this. That's why I say you have to be ready on your own. If you get a pension and it's coming in and you don't need it, it's just extra money, maybe your savings, maybe you use it for vacations, whatever it might be. Ultimately, that's good. But what if tomorrow the pension stopped? Are you going to be in trouble? If so, you have to start figuring out what you're going to do. You need to be prepared today. Don't be prepared after it's too late. It doesn't work like that, right? Now, this is a big infographic here. I'm not going to get into it all. Affording old age. You can see we're talking about pensions here. Longevity is increasing and set to put a growing population of retirees under immense stress in the coming decades as people struggle to pay for their retirement. Life expectancies have risen by an average of 3 years per decade since the 1940s, and while retirement ages have gradually increased, people are spending longer not working without the savings to justify it. It's created a $70 trillion pensions issue in 8 of the world's largest economies, could swell to nearly 6 times of that by 2050. So we're seeing here these different countries around the world: United States, China, India, and so on. Size of the global retirement savings gap. Massive, okay? And right here you can see the $400 trillion number being used again. Ultimately, that's for the total, of course. They mention things here: high percentage of informal workers. unorganized sector, limited access to retirement savings accounts. They're pinpointing that, right? Rapidly aging populations, rising deficits in the US, pension reforms, remember? This is what we see all the time, reforms, and ultimately cutbacks and increasing taxation, okay? The austerity measures from Europe after we saw the sovereign debt crisis and the financial crisis, what do they say? You have to cut back and you get less. Doesn't make sense. Cut back on everything that we're giving you. We're going to make sure that you get less out of it and ultimately increase your taxation, taking from you twice. So this video doesn't end up being 20 minutes in length. I will just move on to the next topic. There was more in that infographic. If you're interested, you should definitely check it out. Now, Neil Kashkari, who is one of the Fed presidents here, I actually like what he says. Of course, the actions they do, I don't agree with, but a long advocate of more stringent regulations to rein in major banks, said the U.S. labor groups whose pension funds took major hits during the financial crisis may have a role to play in countering the political influence in the nation's largest banks. Pretty impressive to hear this kind of talk coming from such a high-profile individual. We are forgetting the lessons of the 2008 crisis. The bailout worked too well. Financial crises keep happening because we forget how bad they were. What's the solution? Making banks raise more equity to fund their investments rather than relying solely heavily on debt. I completely agree with that. Of course, it has to go to a much more dramatic level, but at least somebody's mentioning, okay, we have a problem with debt. At least it's being brought out there. No other industry is levered like the banking industry. If we double the amount of equity that equity banks have, we could go a long way towards resolving the problem that too big to fail banks pose. If it were up to me, we'd be increasing banks' leverage ratio, not decreasing it. But that's all they want to do. Why? Because they want the stocks to go higher. They want housing to go higher. They want everything, every asset just keep going higher. Debt to go higher. Deficits to get worse. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They really don't care. Now, the ECB made a very, very silly mistake, considering the fact that we have an issue here of trying to get this deflation to stop. Big mistake when he said this. The President Mario Draghi acknowledged the region's slowdown in a statement at the IMF meetings, maintained its optimism and the expansion will continue. Of course it will not. Notwithstanding the latest economic indicators which suggest that the growth cycle may have peaked. The growth momentum is expected to continue. I think that's a big problem because ultimately they had to say, well, we did have this whole QE thing and we're going to have to stop it. But then we got this information and we're not going to stop it anymore. So of course, they're not going to be able to stop it. And if they do, where the deflation is going to continue. You could see that. Switching gears. China and German export growth clearly on a downward trend right now ever since the financial crisis. Of course, the bigger trend is simply continuing. It's interesting to see because you would think, oh no, China's doing this, or oh no, Germany's doing that. But you have to understand on a global scale how it's all working. Who's importing, who's exporting, and what are the economic indicators in all of these countries? Because ultimately, if one particular country is not needing the construction of new homes, for example, and you look at this, I don't know, let's say they're getting their lumber from Canada. Well, Canada may be hurt by this because if their lumber is going out to a particular nation, that nation that doesn't need to build homes there, then that lumber is simply going to be sitting in stockpiles and you're going to have a problem with your exports, okay? So that's just an example. PBOC balance sheet, okay? The People's Bank of China balance sheet has been increasing dramatically. This is one of the biggest money printers out there, okay? The PBOC, let's not forget. I mean, people think that they're very conservative and this and that, but they're not. They are doing what all of the other central banks are doing, and that is printing money, trying to boost this system. US, China, yuan, we're looking at this foreign exchange, and you can see where it has gone more recently. I mean, definitely near the $6 mark towards the $7 mark. So definitely a devaluation that has occurred since 2014, I should say, up until today. World official gold holdings. I thought this was funny. I wanted to bring it to you. This is not real, of course, because they're showing the US at number 1. So clearly we have a big problem with that. And China was number 7, which many reports show a much higher number than this. I mean, they're showing 1,800 tons. I've seen reports much higher than that. I've seen some non-factual reports talking about, 20,000 ounces or some tons or something, but I don't think that's correct. But we do see actual official reports showing much higher numbers here. This is according to International Financial Statistics, April 2018. I don't know what to say, but I mean, I don't believe it. So I just thought it was interesting to remember when you're looking at a stat to back it up. Okay, always have more than one, or at least be willing to say, I don't know if it's true or false, but this is what we got. Total foreign gold held on deposit at the New York Fed and monthly change in tons. And you could see what happened here. Big changes that have occurred more recently, and it has started again. Okay? Whether or not it's going to turn into, something that we saw a few years ago or during the financial crisis, I don't know. But that trend has just begun. So let's keep our eyes on that. I think ultimately countries are pulling their money out of the US because they're worried about it and they want to be able to be in control of their own finances. So that's all for this video. If you found it informative, then please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, it helps to support the channel. So I do appreciate that very much. And last but not least, if you found this video informative, I know that you will find my books, The Money GPS, and my newer release, Global Economic Collapse, even more informative. You can actually flip through these books. All you have to do is go over to Amazon. There's a link in the description of this video. You click on it. It'll bring you over to Amazon where they have a look inside feature. It's going to allow you to flip through the pages of these books to see if you like them. Take care.